Welcome to Click for IB Biology. We're studying evolution and speciation. And in this particular video, we'll be looking at the process known as sympatric speciation. There's a blank PDF of this presentation that's down in the description. You can download that and annotate that with your own notes as we go along. And then when finished, you can take a 10-question quiz which is provided with answers so that you can check your understanding and learning of this particular topic. So sympatric speciation, as contrast, of course, with allopatric speciation, which we covered in the previous video. So let's take a look at this process. And to do so, we're going to be looking at what's known as the apple fly. This is a fly which is active in North America, and its original host tree was the hawthorn tree of the United States. And in the beginning, my understanding is that these were hawthorn trees in the eastern part of the United States. But since this process, which I'm about to explain, began, this apple fly maggot has now spread even as far as California. However, originally, what would happen is that the hawthorn tree fly would lay its eggs into the fruit of the hawthorn, and the larva, the maggot, would then eat the fruit and, of course, use that for its own growth and development before hatching into mature flies. And these flies were reaching their peak of emergence in the middle of September. Now, approximately 190 years ago, the apple tree was introduced into the United States. It's Malus is the genus of the apple tree. And what happened was that some of these flies switched their host to the newly available apple trees, and as seen here, and so their maggots were now beginning to grow in the apples. These individuals were reaching their peak formation of adult flies in the middle of July, and so what we're seeing is the separation, the population, the original population is separating into apple fly maggots and hawthorn fly maggots. And there's two aspects to this. One is the selection of the actual host, which is a behavioral thing. And the other part is a time-based factor in which the apples are, the apple fly maggots are reaching their peak formation into adults in the middle of July and September. So we describe this as a temporal, which means time, a temporal feature as well. So sympatric speciation, as distinct from allopatric speciation, means that the two populations of flies become reproductively isolated from each other because of behavior or because of time factors, and this creates a reproductive isolation so that their gene pools begin to diverge. And notice that they are in the same geographic area. This is the key feature of sympatric speciation. Same geographic area, but with behavioral or temporal mechanisms separating and isolating the population. Let's take a summative look at the two forms of speciation which you have been introduced to. The first, of course, was the allopatric speciation, which is based on the creation of geographic barriers. When we were studying chimpanzees, that geographic barrier which was introduced was a substantial river, such as the Congo. But in other examples that one can study, we'll find other types of geographic barriers, which would include things like mountain groups, oceans, and other geographic features such as free ice zones and so forth. Anything which can create a barrier to the movement of the animals. And so in doing so, it creates reproductive isolation. Now, we've just seen an example of the fruit maggots, which is sympatric speciation, and there they were showing behavioral choices of apple or hawthorn as their host, but also there seemed to be a temporal isolation in their reproduction as well. So isolating, taking the group and splitting it, having a splitting event as they start to form, perhaps start to form two species. That's the example in apple fly maggots. There are other examples of behavioral temporal isolation mechanisms, speciation, particularly found in cichlid fish in an East African study. That might be worth one for students to take a look at. And so with the reproductive isolation, the gene pool is split either by geographical barriers, allopatric, or behavioral temporal things, sympatric. And what then happens is that we see in the populations which are isolated from each other a divergence of traits, a divergence of alleles, a change in the heritable characteristics of the species, and of course, by definition, certainly by the IB definition, this constitutes evolution. Link to the next video on adaptive radiation on the left. A chance to subscribe to the channel, very much appreciated your support. And on the right hand side is a shortcut to all the evolution and speciation videos that we have made for supporting this course. Thank you for listening.